Hello, my name is Brian O'Connell, and welcome to my presentation of my master's project for my professional science master's degree in zoo, aquarium, and animal shelter management. For my project, I worked with my mentor Nick Vischer at Denver Zoo to study the emotion of awe and its effect at Denver Zoo. To start off, here's some background information about me. I have grown up in and around zoos, and I've been working and volunteering in zoos for over 10 years. This has been at zoos across the country, including Columbus Zoo, Denver Zoo, the Tallahassee Museum during my time at Florida State, and recently at Disney's Animal Kingdom. I've worked in many different lines of business at these institutions, such as animal care, education, food service, and operations. All this time with and around guests, combined with my career goal of being a senior manager in operations at a zoo or aquarium, has made me very interested in guests and the guest experience. This is what led me to this project at Denver Zoo in the Audience Research and Evaluations Department. This project started with several goals. The most basic was to create a survey that'd be able to find and measure awe around Denver Zoo that would also be very replicable. We also hope to use this awe instrument to be able to map awe at Denver Zoo and identify areas that are more likely and less likely to induce awe. Finally, we aim to find what characteristics of the experiences we're creating awe and what the outcomes of experiencing awe were in our zoo guests. Before I dive into the survey and its results, I believe it is important to get familiar with the emotion of awe. The definition of awe is split into two separate and important parts. The first is the experience of something vast. This could be something such as what this picture is, a grand landscape, or something that's more familiar to a zoo, such as a large animal such as these Asian elephants. Vastness can also include an idea such as experiencing your best friend getting married, or watching your favorite team score a winning touchdown. The second part is the mental need for accommodation. This means that the vastness you just experienced does not fit into your current mental schema, so your brain has to accommodate it. Both experiencing vastness and the mental need for accommodation are needed for a person to experience the feeling of awe. I think it is also important to talk about why we'd want to study this emotion. There are already an extensive amount of studies in the scientific literature that outline many positive outcomes of experiencing awe. First and foremost, experiencing awe has been linked to a higher level of guest satisfaction. Guests that leave the zoo with higher levels of satisfaction are more likely to return and have higher brand loyalty. Second, when a person experiences awe, they're more likely to be open to hearing and retaining new information. That brings me to this chart and word cloud on the slide. This is from a study conducted at Denver Zoo a few years ago and shows that around 30 to 40% of guests remember hearing a conservation message while at Denver Zoo. This is just one of the many possible applications of this awe survey. If an experience that includes awe is paired with conservation messages, this could lead to higher amounts of guests remembering conservation messages, which would help Denver Zoo better fulfill its mission statement of securing a better world for animals through human understanding. Finally, awe is heavily linked in causing those who experience awe to also experience a diminished self. This means that those who experience it are more likely to see themselves as smaller in the grand scheme of things and might feel more connected to the world and those around them. On to how I conducted this study. We modified an already established awe scale from David Yadam in his paper in 2018 titled The Development of the Awe Experience Scale, a multifactorial measure for a complex emotion. In his paper, it had a much larger questionnaire that we narrowed down to 12 questions. This made it easier to place on a single-page survey to be given to zoo guests. We also included questions about inducers of awe, outcomes of awe, and demographics. We collected 1,492 completed surveys for 15 locations across the zoo. Every experience had 100 completed surveys, except for giraffe feeding, because of the limited amount of guests it had per day. So only 92 completed surveys were received for that giraffe feeding over the summer. From the massive amount of data collected, there were 4 preliminary areas of analysis. The first was a reliability test of the AWE scale, which was performed using a Cronbach's alpha test. Second was the analysis of the AWE scores by location. This included taking the average AWE score and standard deviation of each location. Next was a logistic regression of the triggers of the AWE score to see how the AWE score and triggers were related. Finally, we looked at the correlation between the AWE score and outcomes. The first result I would like to present is reliability score. Our AS scale had a Cronbach's alpha score of 0.92. Anything over 0.9 is considered extremely reliable, and so we can say with confidence that our modified AS scale had a very high level of internal consistency, and all 12 of the questions were closely related. When one question was removed from the scale, the Cronbach's alpha score never dropped below 0.9, which reinforces that this is a highly reliable set of questions. Here are the results for the AS averages for the different locations across the zoo. The AS scale ranges from 1 to 5, and the data is arranged from highest to lowest. The giraffe feeding had the highest score of 3.61, and the train had the lowest at 2.63. The average AS score for all surveys was 2.97. I'd like to add before I continue that this does not mean that any of these exhibits are better or worse than one another. This is only a scale of awe across these locations. Looking at some basic trends that I observed. The first trend is that the highest awe scores are mostly for charismatic megafauna that many people come to the zoo to see, such as giraffes, elephants, and lions. Second, there is a trend based on close and unique encounters with these charismatic megafauna. These unique experiences, such as the giraffe feeding and elephant demonstration, scored higher than the animals in their normal exhibit. This is reinforced by the predator ridge information. For predator ridge, there is both a main yard and a side yard, and we looked at the guest responses to lions in both of these yards. The main yard has a viewing area separated by a moat that has a large grass enclosure, whereas the side yard, guests can come face to face with the lions as they are only separated by glass. This led to many interactions between guests and the lions, including many attempts by the male to mark guests. The giraffe, elephant, and lion data all suggest that close encounters and unique experiences is what is best for creating awe at Denver Zoo. One other interesting data point was at the lorikeet exhibit. This is an immersive exhibit where guests can walk through an aviary and can feed the birds. If close and unique experiences are what causes guests to experience awe, then we'd expect the lorikeet exhibit AS score to be closer to the giraffe feeding, the elephant demonstration, and the predator ridge side yard. This was not the case, as is the AS average was below the overall average score. This then suggests that it's close and unique experiences with charismatic megafauna that cause awe, and not just close and unique experiences with any animal. Next, another trend we noticed was that the high AS score for tropical discovery. Tropical discovery does not include any charismatic megafauna like giraffes or lions. Instead, it is full of animals many people have phobias for, like venomous snakes, bats, and many other reptiles, amphibians, and fish. Where tropical discovery creates its awe is in its immersive environment. More immersive experiences have been shown to be more likely to create awe and at a more intense level. Tropical discovery is completely indoors, and it is always very warm with high humidity. This makes it very different than the usual outside weather conditions in Denver, Colorado, which is normally very dry and cold for almost half the year. In addition to the temperature and humidity, tropical discovery boasts an extensive foliage collection that fit in with the theme of the structural design that is meant to mimic a tropical forest. This creates a completely immersive environment that transports guests to the area the animals are native to, and I believe this is what is creating awe for the guests in this location. The other survey that included a high AS score was the exit. This survey was given to guests at exiting the zoo, and the questions were changed to ask about the guest's whole visit. The score for the exit reinforces that awe is being created at Denver Zoo by being one of the highest scores, and so the surveys collected there were able to capture all the awe created at Denver Zoo. Since a very limited amount of guests per day were able to do the giraffe feeding, the high AS score from the giraffe feeding was most likely not reflected in the exit survey. There were a lot more observations from this data, but these are just a few of the initial observations that stuck out for me. Next, we have the results from the logistic regression performed between the triggers of awe and the AS score. The results come out as coefficients that can be converted to odds ratios, which are able to tell us the relationship between triggers and the AS score. The odds ratio for the highest trigger was 2.882 for being closer to animals than I expected. This means that we can conclude that for every 1 unit increase in AS score, the individual has 2.882 higher odds, or is 188% more likely to be closer to an animal than they expected. For example, this means that an individual that scored a 4 on the AS scale is 188% more likely to have been closer to an animal than they expected than an individual that scored a 3. You'll notice a lot of these triggers line up with many of the observations I made from the AWS data. For example, being closer to animals than I expected, feeling like an animal is interacting with me, and experiencing something unique or out of the ordinary can be linked to the giraffe feedings, elephant demonstration, and predator-rich side yard. Feeling immersed in nature can easily be connected to the high AWS score from tropical discovery, where being moved by beauty does not easily connect to any of the high AWS score locations, but I guess this goes along with my hypothesis that charismatic megafauna are best at creating awe. But this area needs to be investigated more before any solid conclusions are made. Overall, I think this data shows there are a lot of triggers that have success in inducing awe across the zoo, and aligns well with our AWS scores at locations data. But this also needs a lot more research to tell us more. The final results I have to share are the correlation between outcomes and the AWS score. The correlations between outcomes and the AWS score range from 0.0633 to 0.538, which are not as strong as we hoped, but still showed us that outcomes are occurring from a high AWS scores. The highest correlation was for a personal connection to an animal or animals, which tells us that the people that had higher AWS scores were more likely to have outcomes of a personal connection to an animal after the experience. I'd also like to point out that all of our correlations came out with significant p-values, but I believe it was because of the number of surveys was so large. There's still a lot of analysis that can be done with these outcomes, but this data gives us preliminary conclusion that awe at Denver Zoo is creating some of the desired outcomes we are hoping to find. After analyzing all of our surveys and statistical analysis, there are a few basic conclusions that can be made. First, we are successful with our initial goal of creating an easily replicable survey to find and quantify awe around the zoo. Second, our data suggested that close and unique experiences with charismatic megafauna, such as giraffes, elephants, and lions, are more likely to induce awe. Also, immersive experiences such as tropical discovery were more likely to induce awe. We are finally able to identify and quantify different triggers of awe and see how they're related to our AWS scale. And finally, we are able to identify and quantify the relationship between several outcomes of awe and our AWS scale. Moving forward, I'd like to split up the data by location so we can specifically identify the relationship between AWS scale and triggers and outcomes based on different exhibits and experiences. Outside of this survey, I believe this study can continue to be used with different triggers and outcomes to find other inducers and outcomes of awe. This specific survey can also be carried out at other zoos, aquariums, other cultural and tourist attractions. The more we learn about awe and how it is induced, the better we can incorporate it into exhibit design and maximize the effectiveness of new exhibits. I would like to take a moment here at the end to thank both Jenny Willis and Nick Fisher. Jenny is the PSM program director, and she has helped me throughout my whole program and has done anything and everything she can to do to help achieve my dreams in the zoo field. Nick was my mentor at Denver Zoo and was the best mentor I could have asked for. He trusted me with a massive undertaking and helped me in more ways than I can articulate. If you're interested in looking at a sample of my survey, my poster I presented about this work at the annual AZA conference, or like my contact information, feel free to scan the QR code with your phone camera on the screen right now. Thank you so much for listening, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comments below.